Erev Tov Chavrim, I'm Stephen Ben-Nun. You're watching Israeli News Live here on World Harvest Television Network. And friends, I want to just let you know before we get started here on our broadcast there, we are looking at moving the time slot that you're viewing here on World Harvest Television Network there. Unless for some reason it's a better time for most of you that do view, please let us know. You can email us. You can see our email throughout the broadcast, israelinewslive.org. Let us know Saturday nights, 10 p.m. if that time is good for you, because at this point right now, we're trying to cut the cost in the broadcast and move to a different time slot. You know, we're just trying to find the best way to keep this type broadcast on the air. As many of you already know, we don't sit here and play around. We're not here to, as the old saying goes, play church. We're not here to do that. We're here to tell you the facts and really bring out biblical prophecy as it unfolds in the news today. And we've already been seeing this huge news about President Trump declaring Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. And quite frankly, I don't think that Jerusalem shouldn't have to be declared the capital of Israel. It should be given that it is the capital of Israel. But as I've watched this, I watched President Trump's declaration with just a bit of caution. And I say this, not that I don't appreciate what President Trump has done, but I have watched closely the verbiage in what he has said, and then following suit with that of President Xi Jinping, President Erdogan of Turkey, and what they're declaring as a Palestinian capital. It has a lot of echoing of things that were done in the not so distant past under Prime Minister Shimon Peres and that of Yitzhak Rabin. We're going to get into that tonight in this broadcast, going back, looking at the late Joel Bainerman, Barry Chamish, who actually published part of his insights there on his own website. Both these men have passed away, both investigative Israeli journalists that lost their lives for standing for what is true, bringing to you what is the truth today. Let's get right into the broadcast here. Jerusalem divided, and I know many of you already could think of Zechariah 12, the prophecies there, where Jerusalem becomes a cup of trembling for all these nations that are burdening themselves with Jerusalem. We discussed that with you here just recently. But now we're looking at a totally different picture altogether, and that is what I want to share with you. As NPR reported here, beginning of a new approach, President Trump declares Jerusalem's Israel's capital. Now, the question is, though, if you look at what's going on in the news here, The Guardian reports Turkey hopes to open embassy in East Jerusalem, says Erdogan. Turkish president announced intention days after leading calls for area to be recognized as the capital of a Palestinian state. Talking about East Jerusalem, that is. That's what President Erdogan was doing. But President Erdogan was not the only one with this in mind. President Xi Jinping, also of China, according to the Dawn, the title here says, China calls for independent Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital. China has officially stated that it supports the establishment of an independent state of Palestine based on pre-1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. China understands the concerns of the Islamic countries on the status of Jerusalem, supports the resolution of the status of Jerusalem in accordance with the relevant United Nations resolutions and international consensus. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Liu Kang said. Now, this is what really gets interesting, friends. Is this really the thoughts of President Xi Jinping of China and President Erdogan of Turkey? Are they echoing their own opinions about what is going on in the Middle East? Or rather, are they parroting a desire of another power, a superpower? And that's something we're going to find out tonight about. Let's take a look at some scriptures, though, when we're looking at exactly what's going on in this arena here. Joel chapter 4. For behold, and actually if you're following in a King James Bible, that's chapter 3. The very first verse in chapter 3 is where we're beginning at here. A little laid out different in the Hebrew Bible here. Kihine beyamim, behold, in those days and that time when I shall bring back the captivity of Judah and Jerusalem. Now, Joel sets the stage. These things that are about to transpire is when Judah, or the house of Judah, and Jerusalem are to return. That's in this day we're living in now, friends. I will gather all nations, and I will bring them down in the valley of Jehoshaphat, and I will enter into judgment with them there for my people and for my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations and divided my land. Moving on to verse 3, and they have cast lots for my people, and have given a boy for an harlot, and sold a girl for wine, and have drunk. Now, I've got to tell you, friends, that verse 3 is so prophetic of events that have happened and have already both been fulfilled. You may not even realize that. But let's back up. Let's back up to verses 1 and 2. You can see that here on your screen. For behold, in the days and that time when I shall bring back the captivity of Judah and Jerusalem. Now, Jerusalem could represent the house of Israel, but it can also represent the city of Jerusalem because they're both captive. Judah, the house of Judah, was in captivity, dispersed at 70 AD by Titus, the Roman general, clearly identified in Obadiah, who does this. Also in the book of Daniel, when it speaks about the prince that shall come would be of the people that destroyed the temple and the sanctuary. So a coming prince or an antichrist is actually of the Romans. All right? Anyway, so bring back to the time of the captivity of Judah and Jerusalem. I will gather all nations and will bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat, and I will enter into judgment with them there for my people and for my heritage Yisrael, whom they had scattered among the nations, and what? Divided my land. Okay? Pazru begoim ve'et aratzi hi laku. All right, the aratzi, the aretz in Hebrew, the very word aretz right here, aleph resh sadi yod. That's the land. That is the way God refers to the land. Not like what you see over in Daniel's prophecy where the division is of Adamah. Adamah is the earth. Okay? Aretz is always referred to as Israel, but Adamah is the earth itself. And when it speaks about in Daniel the dividing of the earth, he's including the entire Middle Eastern area there. And that began back during World War I when the British Empire went and overthrew the Ottoman Empire, and they began to divide up the lands. They had Syria, Transjordan, a state for the Jewish people. Oh, that was kind of interesting. From 1920, right after the World War I, all the way up to 1948, that land got changed so doggone many times you wouldn't even believe it. At one time, Transjordan and all of the state of Israel was going to be for a Jewish homeland. What do you know? Then something changed, and Transjordan went to Hussein, his father, I believe it was, that got that land there for helping in overthrowing the Ottoman Empire. And then, that was in 1922, and then that changed again by the time 1948 comes around with Resolution 181. Now they're dividing the land three different ways, and there's going to be, Jerusalem's going to be an international city. You're going to have the West Bank, Gaza, and of course Israel, and it's such a little tiny strip of land that Israel would get, it'd be nothing at all whatsoever. The people wouldn't have no place to live. The Arabs rejected it, that were living there. But you got to remember, the majority of the Arab people that were living there in that day were brought in from Jordan and from Egypt. And I'm going to tell you something, friends. I am not against the Palestinian people whatsoever. I feel like they have been used. Just like the Israeli government is being used. The same covenant that happened under the Maccabees, where they made a league with the Romans, both the Palestinians and the Israeli government have made leagues with the Romans once again. You remember Lot? Remember how that Lot's children, because by the way, the Palestinians are the children of Ishmael. Not Ishmael, but they're the children of Lot. They're descendants of Lot's children. And we see that Lot and Abraham, they got along just fine. The sheep and their cattle got along just fine. Where the trouble come in was with their shepherds. That's where the trouble come in. They were the ones that strove together over the water. Do you know what the water represents? The water represents the living Word of God. They couldn't, they both fought and strove with one another over the water itself. So the problem, even in Israel today, is not between Lot and Abraham, not between the Palestinian sheep and the Israeli sheep, but rather with the leaders, with the rabbis and the imams, with the PLO and with the Knesset. That's where the problem comes in. Just like it was in the times of Abraham and Lot. No different. Right? So anyway, what do we have here? What's going on? Well, as we can see here, the land is being divided once again. All right? Actually, I lost my thought, but we'll move on anyway. So the land is being divided, and here's what gets really interesting, though. When we get into verse 3, that's actually chapter 3 in the King James, or just a reminder there. And they have cast lots for my people, and have given a boy for an harlot, and sold a girl for wine, and have drunk. All right? That last verse right there, most people have no idea is a fulfillment in the story of Christ, Yeshua himself, Jesus of Nazareth. That's what it says. When they said they have cast lots for my people. Just when Yeshua, when the lots were thrown for him, cast lots for him. And they gave a boy for an harlot. They gave up Yeshua. They gave him up. Instead, took the Roman authority. Remember what the children of Israel did when they cried out? They said, when Pilate came up, determined to release him, and by the way, the only one in his court trial with Pilate that stood for Jesus was a woman. Where was the man? Pilate's wife come up and said, have nothing to do with this just man. I ought to think different about your wife. I ought to think different about your sisters. Same thing when he was being crucified, right? All right, but see, she stood up for him and said, have nothing to do with this just man. They were willing, they were ready there to crucify him. And Pilate said, who should I release unto you then? It's my tradition. I release one among you. They said, release Barabbas, a murderer. And that spirit of murder has been on the children of Israel for the next 2,000 years. And instead, Jesus was taken. They took a boy, and instead they took a harlot. They said, Caesar, we have only Caesar as our king. I'm just paraphrasing some of the different scriptures that are laying out there. See, you took a harlot. You took Rome. Now, Rome was a political entity at that time. Still is today. No different. All right? And then it says here, and sold a girl for wine and have drunk. Do you know what that girl is that you sold for wine? That was Israel today. Remember what it says in the Bible when it speaks about Israel would return in the last days, calls her what? Daughter of Israel, or daughter of Zion, different depending on how you look at it. See? She's a girl and she was sold out. What? The governmental officials sold Israel out so that Rome could hold their communion service there on the Temple Mount. You're going to learn a little bit about this stuff today. Obadiah chapter 1, verse 16. For as you have drunk upon my holy mountain, so shall the nations drink continually. Yea, they shall drink and swallow down, and shall be as though they had not been. In Hebrew, it clearly says, Ki ka'asha shutetem. That is masculine plural. For as, or ki, which is which you have drank kasher al ha-kodeshi upon my holy mountain. That's men only. And I've already shared that with you. You know, and let me tell you something, friends. I'm not against Pope Francis when they went and had the communion there in the upper room. You know, he has a right to. It is a Christian site. Rome considers themselves to be Christians. I may differ with them in doctrine, but I wasn't against that part there, but the way they went about it is what I was against. Because why? Israel sold out their people. so that the Pope of Rome could hold a communion service there. And by the way, that was right after that 9-month negotiations that John Kerry was doing. Remember, the Palestinians have always been the people they're using. As we brought out, I think, last week here, when we spoke about that, how that, that prince that shall come comes up strong with a small people, the Palestinians. And they use the Palestinians as the scapegoats, so to speak, in everything that they do. Palestinian friends, you're being used. Just like Knesset members are being used. All right? So it goes on to say, Ishatu kol hagoim, and they shall drink, the Gentiles, tamid, continually. So when we look over here, when we go back and we see this scripture here in Joel 4, see, and they cast lots for my people, and have given a boy for an harlot, sold out Christ. Instead, you took Rome. And sold a girl for wine. Modern day Israel today got sold out in order so that Rome could drink upon God's holy mountain. It's sad, isn't it? Very sad. Anyway, though, I also find it interesting, with this whole issue with President Trump calling on Jerusalem to be the capital of Israel. At the same time, why he does that, Pope Francis comes out and makes it look like that's a terrible thing that you did. European Union and Pope criticized Trump's Jerusalem announcement, according to the New York Times. And it's a charade, friends. This is what it is. They're all playing a charade. Erdogan and the Arab leaders make it look like East Palestinian should be the capital of the Palestinians. President Trump is saying, well, no, Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. But President Trump doesn't include all of Jerusalem either. And that's why I say you got to do it with a little bit of caution here, right? Now, when it's interesting, the Pope is condemning what he's done, but the ultimate goal is that Rome wants control of the old city. Now, let's back up and look at that. This was the encyclical by Pope Pius XII, the letter of our Holy Father, Pope Pius XII, Redemptoris Nostri, on the Holy Land issue. The following, and this is just the first paragraph only, the following official English translation of the encyclical letter, Redemptoris Nostri, our Redeemer, issued by His Holiness Pope Pius XII on Good Friday, in which he proposes internationalization of Jerusalem for protection of Christian rights in the Holy Land and a settlement based on justice to the refugee situation. The letter supplement the encyclical in multiple Klebius, which the Holy Father issued last October 24th. Now, I'm firmly a believer that God said, call no man father. So, there's one that's holy, and that's Christ Jesus. All right? Yeshua. That's where it is. Now, but the thing is, though, Pope Pius was actually calling on this long before then. This particular map here in the background here, this is from 1947, a UN partition of Palestine. And I know, I've already shared this on Israeli News Live on our YouTube channel before. Moshe Sharit had spoken with Pope Pius XII personally and had discussed with him internationalizing Jerusalem from the beginning. This is why we saw that Ben-Gurion, our first Prime Minister of Israel, and Moshe Sharit, who was the Foreign Minister of Israel, both these men were very adamant about not allowing the fighting for Jerusalem. They'd already divided it, and they'd given the West Bank a huge buffer zone to protect Jerusalem as well. All right, and the Jewish state was much smaller. The Gaza was supposed to run way down here on Israel's border as well. But it was the 1948 war that caused the West Bank people to lose that and caused a lot of the West Bank to be lost as well, especially up in the northern part of Israel. And this is why I believe that they're going to give them the Golan eventually. And this huge settlement. The pre-67 borders. By the way, take a look. Just go on to your Google Maps and you'll notice they have redrawn the boundaries already on Google Maps. The pre-67 borders already exist. The little neighborhood I lived in, Givat Hamivitar, inside of Jerusalem back in 2004 when I was in the Second Intifada, my neighborhood is now, according to Google Maps, part of the West Bank. Judea and Samaria. And again, I'm not against the Palestinian people, and I don't believe that they should be driven out of the land. I believe we could live together there in peace together. But it should be one state, not two. They're going to divide it anyway, though. What are you going to do? Let's take a look, though, seriously. I want you to look here at Joel Bannerman. We're going to look at some of this article. It was on Red Moon Rising, which is Barry Chamish, late Barry Chamish's website. Barry Chamish been on Israeli News Live multiple times there, and Barry had always said to me that his life was in jeopardy. He had had a couple of assassination attempts on his life, and he had to leave Israel. Man had fought in the Lebanon War as an Israeli soldier. He was a veteran of the Israeli Armed Forces, very dedicated, loved his people, loved his country. But he saw a Jesuit influence. He saw not only Illuminati influence, all kind of influences that were being done from outside. Now, Joel Bannerman, the same, and Joel Bannerman was the very man, the very investigative journalist that exposed the secret deal between the Vatican and that of Israel. And this was all under the nose of while there was a deal being at the same time between the PLO, the Palestinian Authority, under Yasser Arafat, and back at this time here, Yitzhak Rabin. Let's watch what he says here. How does the Vatican view the legitimacy of Israel's claim to Jerusalem? This is the title of the article, The Vatican Agenda by Joel Bannerman. Most Israelis have probably never thought very much about what the Roman Catholic Church, the Vatican, thinks about the end of days theology. Jews themselves don't give much thought to what will happen when Gog and Magog take place. Jews don't go in for anything the least bit next world, but instead are firmly placed in the here and now. That's good. However, it does not matter what Jews think. What matters is what the Vatican believes and why it believes this. Judaism and modern Jewish thought pretty much just dismisses the basic tenets of Catholicism outright and doesn't even bother addressing the core question of what is behind Catholic theological claims. Now, if we drop down in the article, I want to share some thoughts here with you. The story, 1992, June 1992, the story of the Catholic Church's attempt to abscond with the old city of Jerusalem from the Jews begins in July 1992. According to the information of the Foreign Ministry's website, literally, from the moment the new Rabin-led Labor government took over from Yitzhak Shamir's defeated Likud party, secret talks with the Vatican and the State of Israel began. What precipitated these secret talks? Who arranged the talks and why? Why were they kept secret from the Israeli public? What was the end result of this agreement? Where do they stand today? The entire subject of Israel's bilateral relations with the Vatican is intentionally kept locked away in secrecy. It is no wonder that nobody in Israel knows much about Israel's Vatican relations, as it never ever reported on the Israeli press. Now, friends, I'm going to tell you something here. We're just skipping around in this, not sharing with you everything that is spoken in this article, but it would do you really good to go look this up. Joel Bannerman on Red Moon Rising, look up what he actually writes in here about these secret talks. Now, those of you that remember, my wife had interviewed Simon Tov in Israel. We brought this part of the interview out before here on Israeli News Live, and Simon Tov clearly identifies that Jerusalem had been divided in a secret deal. And when you read everything about Joel Bannerman and what he writes, it was actually divided under Ariel Sharon when he was prime minister, close to the time frame of what Joel Bannerman is able to bring out before his mysterious death. All right, so we'll listen to just a little portion of this, and then let's move on.
All right.
You know what?
The Vatican agenda, as we go on, continue on with Joel Bannerman here, because like I said, you can see there what Simon Tov shows. It says in 1992, the document which was used in the underlying ideological basis for the Vatican secret deal with Yossi Beilin and Shimon Peres was personally authored by Beilin. The illegitimacy of Israel's sovereignty over Jerusalem outlines the Israeli government's program for the future of Jerusalem and calls for the division of the old city into cantons whose border posts will be under under UN control. The plan, which led to the December 1993 agreement between the Vatican and the State of Israel, was originally discussed in November 1992, and exact same time the first meetings in London took place to discuss an agreement between Israel and the PLO, which led to the Oslo agreements. The real goal was the Vatican attempt to take over the old city of Jerusalem. Oslo, or peace between Israel and the Palestinians, was just a good cover story to hide what was really going on in the sphere of Israel's foreign affairs. And this is what Joel Bannerman says. But here's the key part of this. Watch what he says. May 1994, Mark Halter, a French intellectual philosopher and close friend of Peres, tells the Israeli weekly magazine Hashishi that he personally delivered a letter from Peres to the Pope in September 1993, in which Peres promised to internationalize Jerusalem, granting the UN political control over the old city of Jerusalem and the Vatican hegemony of the holy sites within. The UN would give the PLO a capital within its new territory, and East Jerusalem would become a kind of free trade zone of world diplomacy. All right? Now, did you notice that? Now, watch what Donald Trump says, because remember, Xi Jinping, President Erdogan of Turkey, these two presidents are both calling for East Jerusalem to be the capital of Palestinians, right? Well, this is exactly what the agreement between Rome and Israel was all about in the PLO to begin with. What does Trump actually say in his Jerusalem address? That it should appeal to Muslims. However, what was most significant for the Palestinian Muslims' ears was the president's emphasis twice on the current status of Jerusalem's holiest and most contested site. Trump directly called for maintaining the status quo at the Temple Mount, also known as the Haram al-Sharif. Moreover, addressing the future, he noted that Jerusalem is today and must remain a place where Jews pray at the Western Wall and where Muslims worship at the Al-Aqsa Mosque. All right, so what's going on? Nothing's new under the sun, friends. Both these men, President Erdogan, of course, President Xi Jinping of China, Erdogan of Turkey, and other leaders, all calling on East Jerusalem to be Palestine's headquarters. President Trump, he says Jerusalem is Israel's capital, but he does not include the Temple Mount. He does say that the Jews should be able to worship there at the Wailing Wall, and the Muslims should continue to worship at the Al-Aqsa Mosque. He's showing the plan. They're following the steps. And then when President Putin pulls his military out of Syria, 6 days, he goes there and gives this announcement. Surprise, nobody anticipated it. Why did President Putin move his military out? I believe he too is playing in concert with these other world leaders with Rome's agenda, and he's making way for those Arab nations to come against Jerusalem in order to force the sheep in accepting this bitter battle between Lot and Abraham's shepherds. That's where it lays. Friends, I'm Stephen Benoon. You're watching Israeli News Live. I trust it's a blessing for you. Listen, if you want to support this ministry, look right there on your screen. The Noon Institute is the mother company of Israeli News Live. You can help support it by sending your love and support to us at 8297 Champions Gate Boulevard, number 442, Champions Gate, Florida, 338.